The dust had barely settled on the road when Olivia Osborne realized every last horse was gone, stolen clean from her corral in the dead of night by men who had looked her straight in the eye and shaken her hand just yesterday. She stood in the empty pen behind her small ranch house on the outskirts of Fort Stanton, New Mexico, her hands gripping the wooden fence rail so hard her knuckles turned white, staring at the churned earth where 23 horses had stamped and whinnied only hours before. It was 1878, and she had spent 5 years building her reputation as the most honest horse trader in Lincoln County, purchasing and training wild mustangs and selling them to ranchers and the occasional cavalry officer passing through. Now, everything she had worked for had vanished in a single night, taken by 3 men who had introduced themselves as representatives of a ranching operation up north. Her breath came in short, angry bursts as she walked the perimeter of the corral, reading the tracks in the morning light. Multiple horses driven hard to the east. The men had been convincing, she had to admit that much. They had arrived 3 days ago, asking to see her stock, examining each animal with what seemed like genuine expertise. The oldest one, a silver-haired man with expensive boots, had called himself Richard Thornton. He had praised her training methods and promised to return with payment in full once his partners approved the purchase. She had believed him, fool that she was. They had returned in the darkness instead, cut her fence, and driven off every single horse she owned. Olivia was 24 years old, and she had learned the horse trade from her father before consumption took him 2 winters past. Her mother had died when she was just a girl, leaving her and her father to make their way together on this hard land. She had inherited his eye for good horseflesh and his patience with wild creatures, but she had also inherited his trusting nature, and that trust had just cost her everything. The horses represented not just her livelihood but her future, the foundation upon which she planned to build something lasting in this unforgiving territory. She was still standing there, trying to decide what to do, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her hand moved instinctively to the rifle leaning against the fence post, but she relaxed slightly when she recognized the rider. Wade Anderson was a cowboy who worked on the McAllister Ranch, 5 miles south, though he spent more time drifting from job to job than settling anywhere permanent. He was 27, lean and weathered from years under the desert sun, with dark hair that needed cutting and gray eyes that missed nothing. She had sold him a horse last spring, a good tempered bay gelding that he had paid for in full without trying to bargain her down. "Saw your fence cut from the road," Wade said, swinging down from his saddle. His voice was quiet, the kind of voice that did not waste words. "Looks like you have got trouble." 23 horses, Olivia said, and her voice only shook slightly. 3 men took them sometime after midnight. They were here yesterday, pretending to negotiate a sale. I should have known better. Wade walked to the fence line and crouched down, studying the ground with the focus of someone who had tracked cattle rustlers and wild horses across half of New Mexico. Shod horses mixed with unshod. They drove your stock east, probably planning to swing north once they put some distance between themselves and town. 3 riders, like you said. One of them is riding a horse that favors its left front leg. See how the print is deeper on that side. Olivia moved closer, looking where he pointed. "Can you follow them?" Wade stood up and met her eyes. "I can try. Question is, why would I?" It was a fair question. She barely knew him, and tracking down horse thieves was dangerous work that would take him away from his job and possibly get him killed. "I can pay you," she said, though the words tasted like ash in her mouth. "Once I get the horses back, I can sell them and give you a percentage. That would be payment for something you might never get back," Wade said. "That is a poor bargain." Olivia felt her chest tighten with desperation. "Then what do you want?" Wade was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from the empty corral to the small house to the woman standing before him with dirt on her skirts and fury in her eyes. "I will help you track them down," he said finally. "Every last horse. And when we are done, if you still want to pay me, we can talk about it then." "Why would you do that?" she asked, suspicion mixing with hope. "Because I have seen men like those three before," Wade said. "They take what does not belong to them and move on to the next victim, and nobody stops them because good people think they have to face trouble alone. Maybe it is time somebody showed them different." Olivia felt something loosen in her chest, though she did not let herself relax completely. "When can we leave? Give me an hour to gather supplies and tell McAllister I am taking some time," Wade said. "Can you ride hard and sleep rough? I can do whatever I need to do to get my horses back." Wade nodded and swung back into his saddle. "Pack light, water and ammunition. Enough food for a week, but we will hunt if we need to. Wear clothes you do not mind getting torn up. This will not be an easy chase." He rode off before she could respond, and Olivia turned back to her house, her mind already racing through what she would need. She changed into her oldest riding skirt and a sturdy cotton shirt that had belonged to her father. She filled 2 canteens, rolled a blanket, packed dried beef and hardtack into saddlebags. Her rifle was a Winchester that her father had purchased new in 1873, and she cleaned and loaded it with practiced efficiency. She had ammunition for the rifle, and for the revolver she wore on her hip, a Colt that felt heavy and reassuring against her thigh. By the time Wade returned, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies, Olivia had saddled her best remaining horse, a tough little Mustang mare she had kept in the barn because the animal was recovering from a stone bruise. The mare was healed now, and she danced sideways, sensing the tension in her rider. "That one has spirit," Wade observed. "Her name is Pepper," Olivia said. "She will not quit on me." They rode out together, following the tracks that led away from Olivia's property. Wade rode slightly ahead, his eyes on the ground, reading the story written in disturbed earth and broken vegetation. Olivia watched him work, impressed despite herself by the way he seemed to understand the landscape, noticing things she would have missed. The trail led them northeast, avoiding the main roads, cutting through scrubland dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. "They are pushing the herd hard," Wade said after they had ridden for 2 hours. "That is going to tire the horses and make them easier to track, but it also means the thieves are trying to put distance behind them fast. They might know someone will follow." "How far ahead are they?" 10 hours, maybe 12. "We will not catch them today, but if we keep moving, we can close the gap." They rode until the sun was directly overhead, then stopped briefly to water the horses and eat a cold meal. Olivia found herself studying Wade when she thought he was not looking, noticing the way he moved with unconscious grace, the way his hands were gentle with the animals. He caught her watching once and raised an eyebrow, but he did not say anything. "Why are you really helping me?" she asked as they prepared to mount up again. Wade checked his saddle cinch before answering. "I told you the truth, but if you are asking for another reason, I suppose I am tired of seeing people taken advantage of. I have drifted most of my life, worked 100 different jobs, and I have seen the same pattern everywhere. Strong people prey on those they think are weaker. You are not weak, but you are alone, and those men counted on that." "I am alone because it is easier that way," Olivia said. "People let you down." "Some people do," Wade agreed, "but not all of them." They rode on as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The tracks continued northeast, unwavering, and Wade estimated they would need to make camp soon. He found a spot near a dry wash where a few cottonwoods provided some cover, and they unsaddled the horses and rubbed them down before attending to their own needs. Olivia gathered what deadwood she could find while Wade scouted the perimeter. They built a small fire and made coffee, and for a while they sat in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge overhead. The desert night was cool after the heat of the day, and Olivia wrapped her blanket around her shoulders. "Tell me about your father," Wade said after a while. Olivia was surprised by the question, but something about the darkness and the firelight made it easier to talk. "He was a dreamer," she said. "He believed you could build something good out here if you worked hard enough and treated people fairly. He taught me everything about horses, how to read their temperament, how to gentle them without breaking their spirit. He died believing his daughter would carry on what he started. Sounds like he was right about that. He was wrong about the treating people fairly part," Olivia said bitterly. "That just makes you a target." Wade poked at the fire with a stick. "Maybe, or maybe he was playing a longer game. You built a reputation as an honest trader. People knew they could trust you. That is worth something, even if it did not save you this time." "It is worth nothing if I cannot get my stock back." "We will get them back," Wade said, and the certainty in his voice made her want to believe him. They took turns keeping watch that night, and when Olivia finally lay down to sleep, she found herself listening to the sounds of Wade moving quietly around the camp, checking on the horses, adding wood to the fire. There was something comforting about not being alone in the darkness, and she fell asleep more easily than she had expected. They were on the trail again before dawn, riding through the gray light that preceded sunrise. The tracks led them into rougher country, climbing into foothills where the vegetation changed to scrub oak and rocky outcroppings. Wade pointed out signs that the stolen herd was struggling, horses that had stumbled or balked at the pace. "They are running them too hard," he said. "Some of those animals are going to come up lame if this continues." "That will make them harder to sell," Olivia said. "Depends on who they are selling to. Some buyers do not ask questions if the price is right." By midday they found the first horse, a young chestnut gelding standing alone in a small canyon, one front leg held up and swollen from a bad step. Olivia's heart lifted at the sight, and she approached the animal slowly, speaking in the gentle voice she used for spooked horses. The gelding recognized her and allowed her to take his halter. "That is one," Wade said. 22 to go." They could not take the injured horse with them and maintain their pace, so Wade rigged a temporary hobble that would allow the gelding to move slowly but keep him from wandering far. "We will pick him up on the way back," he said. The tracks continued north and west now, into higher elevations where the air was thinner and cooler. They passed through groves of ponderosa pine and crossed shallow streams still running from snowmelt higher in the mountains. The trail was easier to follow here because the ground was softer, and Wade moved with increasing confidence. On the third day they found 2 more horses, both mustangs that had managed to break away from the herd during a difficult river crossing. Olivia gathered them together and fashioned a lead rope, tying them to a sturdy tree. "We will collect them on the return," she said, though the words felt almost like a prayer. "Please let there be a return journey with all my horses recovered." That evening they made camp in a sheltered spot between 2 large boulders, and Wade shot a rabbit that they roasted over the fire. The meat was tough but welcome after days of hardtack and dried beef. Olivia found herself relaxing slightly, lulled by the warmth of the fire and the satisfaction of having recovered 3 horses already. "You are a good tracker," she said. "Where did you learn?" Wade shrugged. "Grew up in West Texas." My father worked as a scout for a while before he settled down to ranching. He taught me to read sign. After he died, I spent some time living with a Apache family who took me in when I was about 15. They taught me more. The rest I picked up by necessity, working cattle drives and hunting bounties when times were lean. You have lived a complicated life. I suppose so. Never had much reason to put down roots anywhere. What about you? You ever think about leaving this country? Olivia shook her head. This land is hard, but it is mine. My father is buried here. I cannot just abandon what he built, even if it means losing everything trying to hold on to it. Especially then, Olivia said fiercely. If I walk away now, those men win. They get to take what they stole and move on to their next victim, and I have to start over somewhere else with nothing. At least here I have a chance. Wade studied her across the fire, and there was something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. You have got courage, he said quietly. Most people would have given up by now. I do not feel courageous. I feel angry. Sometimes that is the same thing. The next morning they woke to find frost on their blankets and their breath misting in the cold air. They were high in the mountains now, following a trail that wound between peaks still capped with old snow. Wade paused frequently to study the tracks, and Olivia could see him frowning. What is wrong? She asked. They split up, Wade said, pointing to where the trail divided. 2 riders took most of the herd north. 1 rider took maybe 5 or 6 horses east. We need to decide which group to follow. Olivia felt a surge of frustration. If we follow one group, we lose time on the other. That is the idea. They must have realized someone is tracking them. This is their way of making it harder. So what do we do? Wade was quiet for a long moment, thinking. We follow the larger group, he said finally. They have got the bulk of your stock, and they will move slower with that many animals. The lone rider might get away, but we can track him down later if we have to. It was a logical decision, but it still felt like a defeat. Olivia nodded and they turned north, following the larger group's trail. The tracks led them through increasingly difficult terrain, climbing higher into the mountains where the air grew thin and cold. The horses struggled with the elevation, and they had to stop frequently to let the animals rest. On the 5th day, they caught their first glimpse of the stolen herd, a dark mass moving through a distant valley below them. Wade pulled up his horse and studied the scene through a small brass telescope he had brought with him. 2 riders, he confirmed. And I count at least 15 horses, maybe more. They have made camp near that creek. Can we reach them before dark? We could, but we would be better off waiting until morning. If we try to take them now, it will be chaos. Horses running in all directions, maybe gunfire. Better to plan this out careful. Olivia wanted to argue, wanted to ride down there immediately and confront the thieves, but she knew Wade was right. They made camp in a concealed spot overlooking the valley and spent the evening watching the distant campfire, planning their approach. We need to separate the men from the horses, Wade said. If we can spook the herd just before dawn when they are still half asleep, we can drive the horses off and leave those 2 on foot. Then we can circle back and deal with them if we need to. What if they start shooting? Then we shoot back, but I am hoping it will not come to that. They moved before dawn, working their way down into the valley in the gray darkness that preceded sunrise. Wade positioned himself on one side of the sleeping camp while Olivia circled around to the other. She could see the horses now, a mixed group of her mustangs standing hip-shot and drowsy in the cool morning air. The 2 men were sleeping near their fire, wrapped in blankets. Wade gave a low whistle, the signal they had agreed upon, and Olivia urged Pepper forward with a shout, waving her hat and making as much noise as she could. The horses spooked instantly, scattering away from the sudden commotion. Wade was on the other side, turning them, directing them up the valley away from the camp. The two thieves woke in confusion, scrambling for their weapons, but by the time they were on their feet the horses were already gone, thundering up the valley with Wade and Olivia riding hard to keep them bunched together. One of the men got off a shot, but the range was too great and the bullet went wide. Olivia heard Wade shouting at the horses, keeping them moving, and she focused on turning the stragglers, forcing them to follow the main group. Her heart was pounding and her hands were tight on the reins, but beneath the fear was a fierce exhilaration. They were doing it. They were actually taking back her horses. They drove the herd for 2 miles before allowing them to slow, and Wade circled back to make sure the thieves were not following. "They are on foot," he reported when he returned. "They will have to walk back to wherever they left their spare mounts if they have any. That gives us time." Olivia was breathing hard, flushed with success. 15 horses, she said, counting quickly. "That leaves 6 still missing, plus the 3 we left behind." "The lone rider took those 6, Wade said. "Once we get these animals secured, we will go after him." They drove the recovered horses to a small canyon with good grass and water, a place where the animals could rest and recover from their ordeal. Wade fashioned a temporary corral using rope strung between trees, and they spent the rest of the day checking each horse for injuries. Most were tired and footsore but otherwise unharmed, though one mare had a deep cut on her flank that Olivia cleaned and bandaged with strips torn from an extra shirt. That night they camped with the recovered herd, taking turns standing guard in case the thieves somehow managed to follow them. Olivia found herself unable to sleep, too keyed up from the morning's action. She sat by the fire, watching Wade as he moved among the horses, checking on them one final time before settling down for the night. "You did good work today," he said when he finally sat down beside her. "We both did." "I could not have managed this alone." Wade poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot warming by the fire. "You are stronger than you think. I have seen men give up for less." Olivia looked at him in the firelight, seeing the lines around his eyes, the scar on his chin that she had not noticed before, the way his hands were never quite still, always ready to move if danger appeared. "Why do you drift so much?" she asked. "You could settle somewhere, build something." "I have never had a reason to settle," Wade said. "No family left, no place that felt like home. It seemed easier to keep moving." "That sounds lonely." "It is," Wade admitted, "but it is also simple. No attachments, no responsibilities beyond the work I am doing at the moment. When that work is done, I move on." "Is that what you will do when we find the last of my horses? Move on?" Wade was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I do not know," he said finally. "For the first time in a long time, I am not sure that is what I want." The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Olivia felt her breath catch, felt something shift in her chest. She had been so focused on recovering her horses, on the anger and determination that drove her forward, that she had not allowed herself to notice what was happening between them. But sitting here in the darkness, exhausted and dirty and more alive than she had felt in years, she could not deny it any longer. "Wade," she said softly, and he turned to look at her, the firelight reflecting in his gray eyes. She did not know what she was going to say, but before she could find the words he reached out and took her hand, his fingers rough and warm against hers. "I know," he said. "I feel it too." They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the fire burn down to embers. When they finally separated to get some sleep, Olivia felt as though something fundamental had changed, as though the world had shifted on its axis, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The next morning they left the recovered horses in their temporary corral, and set out to track down the lone rider who had taken the remaining 6 animals. The trail led them east, back down out of the mountains, into drier country where the tracking became more difficult. Wade moved carefully, often dismounting to study the ground, making sure they stayed on the right path. It took them 2 days to catch up. 2 days of hard riding through increasingly desolate landscape. They found the rider camped in the ruins of an old adobe structure, the 6 horses tied to a makeshift rail. The man was alone, middle-aged and rough-looking, with the weathered face of someone who had spent his entire life outdoors. Wade and Olivia approached with their rifles ready, moving quietly until they were close enough that running was not an option. "Stand up slow," Wade called out. "Keep your hands where we can see them." The man froze, then slowly got to his feet, his eyes darting between them. "I do not want trouble," he said. "Then you should not have stolen my horses," Olivia said coldly. The thief licked his lips nervously. "I was just following orders. Thornton paid me to help move the stock. I did not know it was stolen." "You are a liar," Wade said flatly. "You cut fences in the middle of the night and drove off a woman's livelihood. That is not following orders, that is theft." "Where is Thornton now?" Olivia demanded. "Where were you supposed to meet him?" The man hesitated, and Wade cocked his rifle meaningfully. "I would answer the lady's question." "Town called Roswell," the thief said quickly. 3 days' ride south of here. He has a buyer there, someone who does not ask questions about where livestock comes from. And the 3rd man, the one who was with you in the mountains. That was Thornton's brother, James. He will have headed to Roswell too once he figured out the horses were gone. Wade and Olivia exchanged glances. "We need to get to Roswell before they sell those horses to someone else," Olivia said. "What about this one?" Wade gestured to the thief with his rifle. Olivia walked up to the man, close enough that he could see the anger in her eyes. "You are going to walk away from here," she said quietly. "We are taking back my horses, and you are going to start walking north, and you are not going to stop until you are out of New Mexico territory. If I ever see you again, if I ever hear that you have stolen from anyone else, I will make sure you end up in front of a judge. Do you understand me?" The man nodded rapidly, relief and fear warring on his face. "Yes, madam, I understand." "Then get moving." They watched him gather his few possessions and start walking north on foot, leaving his horse and saddle behind. Wade shook his head. "You are more merciful than I would have been." "I want my horses back, not revenge," Olivia said. "Besides, he is just a hired hand. The real criminals are the Thornton brothers." They gathered the 6 recovered horses and began the long journey back to collect the others they had left along the trail. It took them 3 days of steady travel, moving carefully to avoid injuring any of the animals, but eventually they had recovered 18 of the original 23 horses. That left 5 still missing, presumably with the Thornton brothers in Roswell. "We need to get these horses back to your ranch," Wade said. "Then we can go after Thornton." But Olivia was shaking her head. "If we take the time to drive these horses all the way back to Fort Stanton, Thornton will have sold my remaining stock and disappeared. We need to go to Roswell now." "That means driving 18 horses across open country and then confronting 2 dangerous men in a strange town. That is a lot of risk. I did not come this far to stop now. Those 5 horses are mine and I am getting them back." Wade looked at her for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met." "Is that a compliment?" "Might be." They drove the herd south, pushing hard but not so hard that the horses suffered. The journey to Roswell took 4 days through country that grew progressively hotter and drier. They passed through small settlements and ranches, and at each stop, Olivia asked about the Thornton brothers. learning that they were known in the area as men who dealt in livestock of questionable provenance. Roswell was larger than Fort Stanton, a growing town with several saloons, a general store, and a livestock corral on the eastern edge where animals were bought and sold. Wade and Olivia left their recovered herd in a safe spot outside of town and rode in to scout the area. They found the Thornton brothers at the livestock corral, negotiating with a heavy-set man who appeared to be the owner. Olivia's remaining 5 horses were in a pen, looking tired and dusty, but otherwise unharmed. She felt a surge of rage at the sight of the silver-haired man who had looked her in the eye and shaken her hand before robbing her blind. "Easy," Wade murmured, sensing her tension. "We need to be smart about this." They dismounted and walked toward the corral, attracting the attention of the Thornton brothers. Richard Thornton's eyes widened when he saw Olivia, and his hand moved toward the gun on his hip. "I would not do that," Wade said calmly, his own hand resting on his revolver. "We are here for the horses you stole. You can hand them over peacefully, or we can involve the law." "Those horses are legally purchased," Richard Thornton said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I've got a bill of sale." "A bill of sale you forged after stealing them from my property," Olivia said. "I can describe every one of those animals, tell you their training history, point out every marking and scar. Can you say the same?" The heavy-set man who owned the corral looked between them, clearly uncomfortable with the situation developing in his business. "What is going on here, Thornton?" "This woman is confused," James Thornton said. "She is mistaken about the horses." But the corral owner was no fool, and he had clearly seen enough shady deals to recognize one when it was falling apart in front of him. "You know what? I think I will pass on this purchase," he said. "You folks need to sort out your ownership issues somewhere else." Richard Thornton's face darkened with anger. "We had a deal." "We do not have anything until I see legitimate papers," the owner said firmly, "and it looks to me like these papers might not be legitimate." For a moment, Olivia thought the Thornton brothers might try to fight, might draw their weapons and force a confrontation. But Wade had positioned himself carefully, and there were other people around the corral now, drawn by the raised voices. The brothers were outnumbered and they knew it. "You are making a mistake," Richard Thornton said to Olivia, his voice cold. "You should have let this go." "The only mistake I made was trusting you in the first place," Olivia replied. "Now get away from my horses." The Thorntons backed off, mounting their horses and riding out of town at a gallop. Wade kept his hand on his gun until they were out of sight, then relaxed slightly. The corral owner helped them load Olivia's 5 horses, and she paid him a small fee for his trouble despite his protests that none was necessary. "You will want to get those animals registered properly," he advised. "Make sure you have documentation of ownership in case those men try to claim them again through the law." "I will," Olivia promised. "Thank you for your help." They collected the rest of the herd and began the long journey back to Fort Stanton, driving 23 horses across the New Mexico landscape. The animals were tired and so were they, but there was a sense of triumph in the air, a feeling of something accomplished against significant odds. It took them a week to make the return journey, moving slowly to allow the horses to recover their strength. At night, Wade and Olivia would make camp and sit by the fire, talking about everything and nothing, learning the shape of each other's lives. She told him about growing up with her father, about the loneliness after he died, about her determination to prove that a woman could succeed in a business dominated by men. He told her about his wandering years, the jobs he had held and the places he had seen, the restlessness that had driven him from town to town without ever finding a place to belong. "I never understood what I was looking for," Wade said one night as they sat watching the stars. I kept moving because staying still felt wrong somehow, like I was waiting for something without knowing what it was. And now? Olivia asked softly. Wade turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her heart beat faster. Now I think maybe I have found it. He leaned forward and kissed her, gentle at first and then deeper as she responded, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair. The world seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them in the circle of firelight, holding onto each other as though they could anchor themselves against all the uncertainty and danger the world contained. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia was breathing hard, her forehead resting against his. "I am scared," she whispered. "I have not let myself care about anyone since my father died. I do not know if I remember how." "You do not have to be scared," Wade said. "We will figure it out together." They reached Fort Stanton on a bright morning in late summer, driving the recovered herd through town while curious neighbors stopped to watch. Olivia's corral had been repaired by a kindly rancher who had noticed the damage, and they drove the horses into the enclosure with a sense of profound relief. Olivia stood at the fence for a long time, counting and recounting the animals, making sure every single one was accounted for. 23 horses, all of them home. Against all odds she had done it, and she had not done it alone. Wade came to stand beside her, his shoulder touching hers. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it," Olivia corrected. "I could not have done this without you, Wade. I owe you everything." "You do not owe me anything, but I was hoping you might consider a different kind of arrangement." Olivia looked at him, her heart suddenly pounding. "What kind of arrangement?" Wade took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I have been drifting my whole adult life, never finding a reason to stay anywhere. But standing here with you, looking at what we accomplished together, I cannot imagine walking away. If you would have me, I would like to stay. Help you with the horses, build something together. See where this thing between us might lead." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, tears of relief and joy and hope. "I would like that," she said. "I would like that very much." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear, only the certainty that they had found something rare and precious in each other. Over the following months, Wade proved himself invaluable on the ranch, working alongside Olivia to train the horses and rebuild her business. He had a natural way with the animals that complemented her own skills, and together they developed a reputation for producing some of the finest horses in the territory. The ranch prospered, and so did their relationship, deepening from attraction into something stronger and more lasting. On a cool evening in October, as they sat on the porch of Olivia's house watching the sun set over the mountains, Wade pulled a simple gold ring from his pocket. "It is not fancy," he said, "but it is real, and it is all I have got to offer besides myself. Will you marry me, Olivia?" She did not hesitate. Yes. They were married in Fort Stanton's small church a month later, with half the town in attendance. It was a simple ceremony, but it was filled with genuine warmth and joy. The kindly rancher who had repaired Olivia's fence stood as Wade's witness, and the woman who ran the general store stood for Olivia. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed his bride with such tenderness that several of the watching women wiped their eyes. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Wade took on more responsibilities, expanding the operation to include breeding as well as training. Olivia's business continued to grow, and within 2 years they had built a larger barn and expanded the corrals to accommodate more animals. They hired a young cowboy to help with the day-to-day work, allowing them to take on more ambitious training projects. In the spring of 1881, Olivia gave birth to their first child, a strong, healthy boy they named Owen Thomas Anderson, honoring both of their family names. Wade held his son with such wonder and tenderness that Olivia fell in love with him all over again, seeing this rough cowboy transformed by fatherhood into someone gentle and devoted. Owen was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Emma Rose, who had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn determination. The ranch house rang with children's laughter and the sounds of a family being built from the ground up. One evening, when Owen was 5 and Emma was 2, the family sat together on the porch watching the horses graze in the pasture. Owen was pestering his father with questions about riding and roping, while Emma dozed in Olivia's arms. Wade looked over at his wife, and the contentment in his expression spoke volumes. "You ever regret it?" Olivia asked quietly. "Giving up the drifting life, tying yourself to one place?" Wade reached over and took her free hand, squeezing gently. "Not for one single moment. I spent years looking for something without knowing what it was. Turns out it was this. You, the children, the ranch, a place to call home and people to share it with. I am glad you helped me track down those horses," Olivia said. "So am I. Best decision I ever made was to offer my help that day. Changed both our lives." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and gold, the Anderson family sat together in peaceful contentment. The ranch that Olivia's father had started, and that she had fought so hard to keep, was now thriving, a true family operation that would last for generations. The horses in the corral were worth more than money. They represented hard work, determination, and the bonds between people who chose to face life's challenges together. Years passed, and the ranch continued to prosper. Owen grew into a fine horseman, inheriting his mother's gift for training and his father's patience. Emma proved to have a head for business, keeping the accounts and negotiating sales with a shrewd intelligence that made her parents proud. 2 more children followed. Another son named after Wade's father, and a second daughter who was the image of her grandmother. Wade and Olivia grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered droughts and hard winters, celebrated births and mourned losses, built a legacy that extended beyond just the ranch to include genuine friendships throughout the territory. They never forgot the ordeal that had brought them together, and sometimes in the evening they would sit on their porch and tell the story to their grandchildren, about the horses that were stolen and the long chase to get them back. "Your grandmother could have given up," Wade would say, his weathered hand holding Olivia's. "But she had the courage to go after what was rightfully hers, and the wisdom to accept help when it was offered. And your grandfather could have ridden away," Olivia would add. "But he chose to stay and fight beside me, and that made all the difference." The grandchildren would listen with wide eyes, fascinated by this tale of adventure and romance from their grandparents' youth. And when the story was done and the children had been sent off to bed, Wade and Olivia would remain on the porch, hands clasped, watching the stars emerge above the New Mexico landscape that had been the backdrop for their greatest adventure and their deepest love. In 1902, 24 years after that fateful day when 3 men stole Olivia's horses, the Anderson Ranch was recognized as one of the most successful horse breeding operations in the territory. The children had grown and started families of their own, though several still worked on the ranch alongside their parents. Wade was 51 now, his dark hair shot through with gray, but he was still strong and capable, still the steady presence at Olivia's side. She was 48, with laugh lines around her eyes and hands calloused from a lifetime of work, but she was as determined and capable as ever. On a warm summer evening, as they walked through the pastures checking on the horses, Wade stopped and pulled Olivia close. "Remember what I said that first night when we were tracking down your stolen stock? You said a lot of things. I said we would get back every one of those horses, and we did." Olivia smiled. "We did, and we got so much more besides." She looked around at the ranch they had built together, at the horses grazing peacefully in the twilight, at the house where their children had grown up, and their grandchildren now played. She thought about the young woman she had been, standing alone in an empty corral, certain that her life was over. She could never have imagined then what would come from that terrible morning, what incredible journey would begin with a simple offer of help from a drifting cowboy. Wade kissed her softly, a kiss that contained 24 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," Olivia replied. "Thank you for not riding away that day. Thank you for letting me stay." They walked back to the house together as the sun set behind the mountains. Two people who had found in each other everything they had been searching for. Two lives intertwined so completely that neither could imagine existence apart. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations, but at its heart would always be this story. Of horses stolen and recovered, of a woman who refused to give up, and of a cowboy who found his home at last in helping her fight for what was hers. It was a love story forged in hardship and determination, tested by adversity and proven true by time, and it would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of two people choosing to face the world together rather than alone.